So here's the thing. A lot of people get really excited about which political party they want to support. And they don't even really ask themselves in their head which one they want to support because they automatically go to one and then they just they ooze with the need to support any aspect of that party without stopping and checking in and being like, hey, is this really the party that's supporting my needs? And that's kind of one of those big important questions that we have to sit back and ask ourselves about. Are we getting individuals who are supporting our future needs, seeing how we've spent so much money and so much of our time paying into this country? A lot of people don't think about it from the hours and hours and hours of dollars that they've earned and paid in throughout their entire life. And as a result of that, they have to ask themselves, what true benefit are they getting from their Social Security benefits going forward, especially considering a 2024 presidential election in the not too distant future, which will be very likely between Joseph Biden and Donald Trump. So, what I want to do is have a relaxed conversation, if you will, a calm setting where we discuss the two potential candidates and what are the positives and negatives. I don't want this to be a flinging match. I don't want people to be angry with each other in the comments. I want people to be relaxed. I want people to approach this with kind of like a neutral, don't want to throw anything at anybody else kind of uh, footsteps to the beach manner, right? We don't want to go ahead and run at anybody. So, with that said, I have this article here. I thought it was pretty good by Vance Cariaga, January 10th, 2024. So, it's a couple days old. I'm going to read you some of the basics in here. In a 2022 survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, they found that 57% of U.S. adults cited making Social Security more financially sound as one of their top priorities for policy making going into 2024. This is comparable shares in both parties, agreed essentially 58% of Republicans, along with 56% of Democrats. So, put another way, making Social Security benefits as a program better, fixing the shortfalls, fixing the trust funds, is very high on the priorities list for people within the top three for most people. Now, with that said, the future of Social Security, I'm going to read through it, has become a hot topic during the 2024 presidential election. The program's Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is expected to run out of money within the next decade, around 9 years from now, leaving Social Security solely dependent on payroll taxes. Those taxes currently cover only about 77% of benefits. So when people basically go ahead and get a Social Security check right now, their retirement check, or potentially their disability check, or potentially Medicare related functions, you have essentially the money that's paid in on taxes, and then also a trust fund amount as well. And what's happening is that there's not enough workers paying in, so that trust funds keep losing money each year in their ability to stabilize the whole thing because there's not enough money here to go ahead and cover everything. And so what's happening is we have this overall lessening feature. Now, when this happens, we know about 9 years from now, those trust funds will run out. And all we'll be left with, instead of these two options to receive payments, will be the one option of what people pay in taxes each year. So we don't have that bolstering effect of also having the trust funds. Now, with that said, if somebody were to essentially look at the basic math, you would realize that the check you're getting right now would be very equivalent to the check you'd be getting 9 years from now, because all those COLA increases, those cost of living adjustments, would be wiped out from not having those trust funds. So think about how hard it is to live right now at the cost of living adjustment with everything being so expensive. Now imagine 9 years from now when everything is vastly more expensive and still having to live on that same check amount that you are right now. Now, I want to go right into it. Basically, these are the things that Biden wants to do with the Social Security system in 2024, going into a potential second term as president of the United States. Okay. Biden has proposed a 4-point plan to boost Social Security that would mostly impact high earners who can depend on their retirement savings to get by. Okay. The challenge is getting a divided Congress to support the plan. Here's a look at them. Number one, tax earned income above $400,000, leaving wages between $160,200 and $400,000 untaxed. In 2024, that'll jump up to $168,600 are not taxed, up from $160,200 in 2023. So let me explain what that means real quick. When you earn income up to $160,200, you pay FICA taxes, which all in all come out to be a little bit over 15% of whatever you earn. What they're saying is, okay, what if we go ahead and have this hole right here, a donut hole, where those people who are basically earning $400,000 and up have to pay that same tax for all their earned income above $400,000. Nobody pays any income right here, rather FICA taxes right here in between that $168,000 and $400,000, and everybody continues to pay their 15+% between 0 and essentially $168,000. The idea is to get the super wealthy to pay for the future of Social Security benefits, because essentially when the wealthy are earning money and they earn their millions and millions, if you can tax them, that will significantly bolster the trust funds. What is the likelihood of this rule actually passing? Almost 0%, because the super wealthy do not want their income to be taxed another 15%, because they can very easily use that same amount of money to just put in politicians who are not likely to significantly increase the amount of money that they're going to be taxed. Think about it. It's cheaper for 1 year to pay, let's say, 4 years worth of 15% of your income to have politicians put in who will essentially support not putting through a mega tax on the super rich, versus having to, for the rest of their time, pay 15% on everything above $400,000. Almost a 0% likelihood of being passed. Number 2, change the calculation for determining annual Social Security cost of living adjustments so that they are no longer based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, the CPI-W. Biden favors basing this on the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, which makes sense. The disabled and the elderly, the retired, spend money like the elderly. Now, this is not going to be much, and they should have changed this a long time ago. And we have 3 years now where they didn't change it. And 2 of those years were both pro-Democrat for Senate, pro-Democrat for essentially the House. So that should have gone through, but it didn't. So it does make us question the validity of giving a second term without really demanding what's actually going to be changed. I've heard many arguments related to this, that even though it was pro-Democrat for both the Senate and the House, there were 2 individuals there who were not playing along. My response to that is, it was never even really brought to the table for discussion. And when you want something so easy as this, low-hanging fruit, right? Like just a branch, you could just grab it easily and pass it through. This should have been something that was an easy win for the politicians to get through. But they didn't even try. They really didn't. It was always first round negotiations, and then it was immediately cut. Number 2, raise the primary insurance amount, PIA age, that determines how much money you'll receive in Social Security benefits. Raise the primary insurance amount. So the bottom line is that we're running into a situation where across the board, they want to raise different things that go ahead and push it farther down the line for you to receive benefits, for you to get a higher amount of benefits, for them to calculate, from your earnings what you should be getting down the line. They're doing all these little ideas to try and figure out essentially how they can make more money go in and less money go out. And the basic fundamental of this problem is that people are not working and earning as much as they used to. Because when you take 15+% of a bunch of people, but they're all earning less because we exported significant amounts of our production from farming to transportation to manufacturing to final, creation to transportation again to stores, etc., what you end up with is a situation where the country can no longer support many of its social security programs like it used to. And that's the scariest theme of this video. We just don't pay people enough because we don't make enough, right? We're no longer a country that's just, hand over fist making money from everything. Instead, we're a country that basically receives items mostly from overseas, and then we sell those items at a greatly increased price to try and seek some profit out of it. But most of that profit for those particular items is going back to these other nations because they're the ones who obtain the raw materials, handled the manufacturing, created the final product, and then shipped it back over here. So what's happening is we just don't make stuff as a country anymore, and that's a bad thing. Now, with that said, I don't know if this will go through, but usually this is going to be some sort of formulation of punishing those who are younger. And the Democrats and the Republicans are both attempting to basically do this thing. And what they're really saying when they look at this is that people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100 probably won't be affected by changes. But those who are in their 30s, 20s, etc., will be affected. And all they're really doing is creating a system where the value of Social Security benefits for those in their 20s and 30s is not good. And what will happen is those in their 20s and 30s will quickly turn into their 30s and 40s and 40s and 50s, and they will vote away Social Security benefits for those that are older. Now, a lot of people will say de facto they have the promise. There is no promise. The Social Security Administration, by and through the Supreme Court, has had rulings that it's just a tax. It's not truly a solid, concrete right. Next one. Raise the special minimum benefit for lifetime lower wage workers to 125% of the federal poverty level for Social Security beneficiaries. So let's talk about that real quick. It's a good idea. Essentially, instead of having super poverty-based, workers, right, that essentially go ahead and, become disabled or retired, and that small check that they get is so low that they require supplemental security income benefits to go ahead and bolster them. So I think Republicans and Democrats should both be on board with this, but realistically, Democrats are the ones pushing it, and Republicans should be joining them. Now, here's what it means. It means that 125% above the poverty level is a set number that we get every single year. Now, if we go ahead and give everybody that has a really small retirement check or a really small SSDI check, essentially 125% of the poverty level, then we won't have a lot of people going on to SSI benefits concurrently. That just means doing two programs at once with their retirement and their SSDI benefits. That's a good thing because it gets people off of SSI benefits. It gets them more likely to go and do additional work. And it also pulls more of the burden off of the tax dollars paid in that go into supplemental security income benefits. Now, there's a kicker here. There have been significant amounts of refugees, significant amounts of asylum seekers going on to SSI benefits. Because, as you know, the current model for immigration is letting a lot of people in who then begin the registration process to try and obtain their 7 years of SSI benefits. This has created a significant imbalance situation where basically we have a lot more people seeking SSI benefits that are not our traditional citizens. So what they're trying to do is reduce the amount of people on SSI benefits and making these people rely more heavily on the trust funds. But this will also cause the trust funds to run out more quickly. So they will rely on essentially this in combination with taxing the rich more, which of course, if they can't tax the rich more, this will never be a reality. The leading Republican candidate, I'll go back to the article, former President Donald Trump, has said that he has no plans to touch Social Security if he returns to the White House. Last year, Trump said that under no circumstances should Republicans vote to cut a single penny from Medicare or Social Security. He backed that claim up a month ago, saying that you don't have to touch Social Security. He also basically stated that oil will pay for it going forward. Now, what do you need to know about this? It's not going to be a Haley. It's not going to be a Chris. Well, we know de facto it's not going to be a Chris Christie. It's not going to be a DeSantis. It's going to be a Trump. So what happens here is that Donald Trump has no actual definitive plan for Social Security benefits other than it's a pure hands-off situation. He's not going to make it harder for young people to get benefits in the future. He's not going to reduce what the elderly currently get every single month. He's not going to change basically the system that the disabled rely on to go ahead and have money. Now, President Biden has, and we're going to talk about things not in the article. Now we're going to talk about things that I've noticed. And remember, this is a neutral place. We're cool here. We're just talking about fun stuff. We're just going through the basics of where each person stands. President Biden has hired on 87,000 potential IRS agents to tax people more and go and find people who aren't paying taxes, which should increase the amount of money that's ultimately going into the trust funds. President Trump believes in a smaller IRS. A smaller IRS is not good for Social Security benefits because Social Security benefits rely on tax dollars. So does paying for the agency, so does supplemental security income benefits. But as you can imagine, people are not happy about supplemental security income always being covered and the programs that have been paid into all these years not having enough money to cover the benefits to pay people back now when they're older or disabled. And the thing that gets people really angry is that the mishandling of the investment of those funds has resulted in the trust funds basically having a timer as to when they'll run out. So, if we're honest with each other about what's going on in the nation, we know that the economy is doing very, very poorly. And I've done other videos about this, and I'm not trying to take a shot at any potential political candidate. This is a neutral thing. There are certain things in this economy that have not done well. The price of food, okay, the price of oil, the production that's required as a result of the price of oil, anything from diesel tractors to diesel trucks to raw fuel, giant ships transporting lots of raw material and finished products. So my point to you is basically this. We don't really have a solid measurement as a nation on what the actual increase has been for buying things for the average person, because the cost of living adjustment math is fraudulent. Here's why. Every year when they do a cost of living adjustment, if it becomes too pricey for the person to continue to buy steak, the upper end product, they will then down tier to a lesser product and pay them based off of the cost of that, from steak to chicken to this to ground beef, etc. Well, they keep downgrading individuals with their cost of living adjustment. And now we're at the point where when they do the calculation, people aren't getting anywhere near what they're supposed to be able to buy what they used to. And it's about over $500 per month. That should be an increase for every check of Social Security, disability insurance benefits, and retirement benefits. Now, that's bad. But what's worse than that is an economy that is not doing what it needs to be successful to keep the prices of food down. Commodities that are important to the disabled and the elderly, the retired, are very simple. It's housing, utilities, and food. You don't even include transportation in that. A lot of those individuals are not driving around to all different kinds of places. So again, housing is the most important for many of them because they want to have a roof over their head. Food, incredibly important to them. The utilities to keep the room going, the electricity, the water, etc. Okay, so here's the thing. Housing and utilities, they can control the price of that through the United States government. But food, they can't really control it that much. And so the problem is when it comes to food and clothing, the prices of these items have skyrocketed. Now, when they do their cost of living adjustment, they don't use traditional items that we buy, meaning they don't go and measure a lot of these products that are labeled products that are specifically used for their math. they use non-label products and then go by the general purchase price. So instead of it being an analysis basically on actual Jello, it's analysis on the fake version of Jello that we still buy, eat, whatever. Now, of course, they don't usually use Jello. They use things like eggs, bread, etc. Now, with that in mind, you have to understand that every time they do the math is incorrect for what we actually buy. Because what we actually buy is usually a brand version of what they're calculating this thing off of. So unfortunately, the brand prices have skyrocketed significantly more. And so what that means is that most people have had to downgrade to the lesser type of product that's non-brand. And they've now reduced their standard of living to constantly checking over their food cost prices. So before they check out, they're looking at these prices saying, ooh, can I afford this? Can I not? We don't know what the numbers are. You could look at the consumer price index. You could look at some of the other math that's been created. But at the end of the day, it hasn't been over the past 3 years, essentially a 5+, an 8+, a 3+% increase, right? Something under 20%. No, it's realistically probably been around a 40 to 60, maybe a 45 to 65, 70% increase from what we're used to actually paying. Now, the problem with that is that under a president that does not value the use of significant amounts of oil being purchased at cheap prices to allow tractors and tractor trailers and giant ships and yada yada to do what they do, you end up with things getting more expensive across the board, especially when you kill off pipelines and you go back to purchasing oil overseas, which strengthens, of course, of their countries, not so much the United States. So what that means ultimately is that everybody has to pay more money. That means also that the amount of money that's paid on a monthly basis skyrockets for the average American because they're paying a lot more money for food, for clothing, and things like that. It's like a negative stimulus. Every single month, you're losing a lot more money because of this style of politics. Now, with that said, the Democratic Party used to stand specifically for the rights of humans, but an emphasis on the rights of Americans. It's more so shifting to the rights of potential future Americans than those that are current Americans. I'm sure you've seen the headlines. You've seen where veterans are being kicked out of their temporary housing to allow immigrants, migrants, asylum seekers to take their place. And what's happening with this is that it appears that the government is trying to downplay the importance of an American to them. Now, many people do not know that immigrants, asylum seekers, refugees are very important to the future of America's economy, because in order for us to continue to grow at a rapid pace, we have to have more humans working and paying taxes. But for 7 years plus a potential 2-year up, many of these individuals can tap into that SSI, Supplemental Security Income Program. And when that happens, that means for potentially 7 years to 9 years, that person is not going to be really producing or paying as much taxes by having and being forced to go work than they would if they weren't receiving those SSI benefits. And of course, there are a lot of immigrants that don't get SSI benefits. Now, understanding that, it means that this is a long-term Democrat plan to bolster the amount of votes and also increase the amount of inhabitants and future civilians, which will ultimately increase, the amount of people paying taxes. If you couple that with a massive increase in IRS agents seeking those who aren't paying taxes or aren't paying enough taxes, you get a system for future, taxation of the American people that's never been seen before. Now, this is good for the Social Security Administration because more taxes paid in means more money for the SSA's administration, supplemental security income benefits being paid out, and trust funds being filled up. Now, the Republican side. The Republican side is always better when it comes to the economy. That is the method that which they stand on. Marketplace capitalism. Competing companies, small governments, lots of companies battling it out, keeping prices cheap so that you're more likely to buy and use them and then buy more of them. It would be fair, it would be accurate to say that the economy would be in a much better place under a different political party system, because the focus would have remained on fewer immigrants, having the government pay for more SSI benefits, more food benefits, more transportation benefits, potentially opening even more oil pipelines, keeping more of the oil to oil transportation that we use on a daily basis based off of US lands, out of Texas is one of the big ones, Alaska another one. People will argue this is incredibly bad for the environment. It's not great. Burning fossil fuels, not great. Not great for it. But coming out of COVID, I think we can all agree that it would have been a far greater economic policy to continue to have more oil being produced cheaply in America and going to Americans. That's a simple fact. I mean, that's the basic, obvious one for the economy doing better. Now, would you have seen these 40%, 50%, 60% over a 3-year period increases in products? No, but they still would have been bigger increases because at the end of the day, we were coming out of COVID. A lot of people say, well, President Biden's done an impossibly horrible job. He's coming out of that. Even President Trump, if he were in, would have had a difficult time. Would we have seen this 40, 50, 60% increase? No, probably somewhere around 10, 15, 20 would have been more realistic. Now, what is the practical application of all this? It means that if we'd had a better economy, we would have had a mini stimulus each month by things being cheaper. A penny saved, a penny earned kind of gig. And as a result of that, what happens is you kind of have this situation where you have to look at how much money these disabled people actually have. Now, if you go way back in time to the 50s, SSDI was just coming in, right? Go into the 70s, SSI benefits, that was coming in, right? They had a lot more money per month to go ahead and do things as a disabled person. That's why many of the disabled people back in the day, you'd see them RVing, going places, experiencing America, etc. But now, and of course, gas prices and diesel prices are low because we're coming into the months right before they jack them way up because of the presidential election. With diesel prices and gasoline prices being high, this is a situation where realistically, at the end of the day, what we're going to see is fewer and fewer disabled and retired people traveling out and enjoying their life. That, coupled with CDI units going after the disabled, it makes the disabled be in a very difficult position. Even the VA people who were assured their benefits are now going through a recheck to see if they're still truly disabled. So one of the things that I want to talk about as a final thought here when it comes to potential presidents, one has a plan that can't get passed by Congress. And one has no plan but to basically, the plan is basically to do nothing, not to change them, modify them, update them, etc. Both plans, in and of themselves, will fail. So then the only thing that this really comes down to is which party do you believe is more likely to change the rules and laws governing the Social Security benefits going forward into 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, right before 2029, which is getting really close to when the trust funds will run out. Now, the ironic thing is we're in this incredible position because we know where things were at when President Trump was in office when it comes to Commissioner Saul and them dealing with Social Security changes. We also now have a track record of over 3 years with President Biden to know what his accomplishments are when it comes to changes for the Social Security Administration. And I'll summarize them very quickly for you. President Trump put in Commissioner Saul. Commissioner Saul ran the SSA like a small business. They pushed and pushed and pushed to make it more effective and efficient. But at the end of the day, they were beginning the great exodus of SSA employees because they didn't want to work there. They want to be part of it. And they had to work out deals with the unions, but weren't able to. which made President Biden's future, Commissioner Kijikazi, go ahead and basically have a very difficult time with negotiating things with the unions, getting people on board, hiring more employees for the Social Security Administration, which resulted in this catastrophic crisis that the SSA is facing. Million person backlog, 60,000 employees. They need 95,000 employees. Just this horrific situation. Now, with that said, President Biden focused more on getting more employees for the IRS than the SSA, because more employees for the IRS gets you more taxable income, right? It's taxable money that the government can use to spend. Whereas supporting the SSA and getting more employees for the SSA, well, what does that do? It speeds up disability adjudications, gets people their retirement benefits faster, makes the wait time at the offices way faster, makes phone calls into the SSA take 5 to 10 minutes instead of 35 to 45 minutes. Well, that doesn't really add to a politician's spending power. So they went with getting more agents in the IRS. So what do we know with this whole thing? During President Trump's, 4 years, the Social Security Administration was not an important or relevant agency to the future plan of Republicans. It just wasn't. It wasn't. Looking at 3 years under President Biden, it was slightly more an agenda that was being used as a propping factor for getting more votes and using fear tactics against the Republicans to try and highlight and, let's call it like it is, magnetize people to the Democratic Party. But we haven't seen any really simple fixes that should have come along. Like, for example, getting rid of the $2,000, $3,000 resource limit for SSI people. That should be, $10,000, $20,000. Easy, low-hanging fruit. Getting rid of the marriage penalty rule for SSI people. Very easy, low-hanging fruit. And as a result of this, I can't tell you that the current administration is going to be good for Social Security benefits going into 2025. But what I do know is that the commissioner that just replaced Commissioner Kijikazi is trying to, from an administrative standpoint, fix a lot of the issues that the Social Security Administration has. They took a worker that basically worked in the system, nonprofits, and they replaced them with a politician. But the politician is hungry, Commissioner Martin O'Malley. You don't really get many politicians that are willing to throw their political career on the stove to see if they can magically fix the fire so that one day they might be considered for presidency. So that's good. But if President Trump gets elected, Commissioner Martin O'Malley will immediately be terminated and they will put somebody else in, which could be like Commissioner Saul again. Cameraman, thank you for the $2 donation. Extra tax on oil will go away. Zero emission cars. Right. So one of the big things that is going to be interesting in the future is essentially how our electric grid, which relies heavily on, of course, creation of, coal-related power, oil-related power, everything from nuclear-related power to all kinds of things. But it's not like there's just some giant lithium battery that magically powers everything. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves when it comes to future electrical requirements. Now, if you guys check it out, they have people on YouTube doing the math to tell you how much electricity it actually takes to power the cars to drive those distances. And it's multiple houses worth of electricity to power one electric car. Old school truck driver, thank you for the $10 donation. I super appreciate it. That's amazing. I super duper appreciate that. That's awesome. And again, cameraman and old school truck driver are both members, which always helps us basically grow and get new gear. So in summary to this situation, there is no great option for Social Security benefits when it comes to a presidential option, which is weird because it's 71 million potential voters. But the Democrats do have an advantage because the less likely, Haley, Chris Christie's out. There's other options, but DeSantis and Haley, that's basically what's left. Those two have a history of being negative towards Social Security benefits. But so does President Biden. Some of the statements he's made were about complete eradication of the program, like getting rid of it in total. And so the thing is this. All these politicians have a history of saying negative things about the Social Security Administration because they're not like us. They come from big money, or they have now big money. And as a result of that, they have big money backers. So they don't live in that world of having that fear of not having enough. Ultimately, you have one party, the Democrat Party, and they're going to continue to use Social Security benefits as the main focal point for saying this is why you should trust them. But what have they really done with the low-hanging fruit options to pass bills into law for the Social Security Administration over the past 3 years? Remember, they had House and Senate for 2 of them. Then you look at the Republicans. The plan is don't touch them. Don't do anything with them. And while they've pretty much been doing that for a long time, I mean, the major changes were in the 80s, right? And that's where the Democrats and Republicans both supported screwing over the retired by heavily taxing them. At the end of the day, the Republicans are probably a good shot when it comes to not having massive inflation. And that massive inflation factor adds up significantly to reducing the overall check that you receive each month. So when I look at this, I'm not going to suggest you should go with the Democrats or Republicans. I'm not making this political video where I tell you where you have to go. But those are all the things that you should consider going forward, because ultimately, whichever party is elected, their commissioner will be in the Social Security Administration handling the administrative functions. And then the House and the Senate will be dictating the big money issues with the SSA, meaning your benefits. Guys, I will catch you a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful night. It is now 2:31 a.m. I hope you enjoy your Saturday. This is going to be a 3-day weekend. Please remember, if you have quick questions, don't call the firm between 9 and 5 with those. Catch up with me when I go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Facebook on Tuesdays, YouTube on Thursdays, around 8:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard on those nights. You call in the 407-279-1754 number. It's in the bio below, and we'll go through your questions. You have a wonderful night. Please remember to like, subscribe, and if you could, go ahead and check out becoming a member to support it, because that's getting us the gear and the doggy treats to make this thing happen. I'll catch you guys later. You have a wonderful night, and we will go from there. Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.